All right, we now have joining us on the Sharks Audio Network. It is Brian Boyle of NHL Network, and you can watch NHL Network Brian Boyle right here on NHL Now and NHL Tonight throughout the second half of the season. Mr. Bees, what's going on? How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good. I'm excited because usually how the schedule works for me is my 9-year-old stops playing. The next couple weeks his hockey season ends, and then I can kind of dive into a little bit more TV stuff, getting in some more dates to get on and talk hockey and the playoff push. It's the best time of year to talk about it, to
Yeah,
analyze it, and it's exciting for me. So I'm doing great.
I love it, man. I love it. And I wish I could say that the San Jose Sharks were doing great. The outlook for the future, I think, is very, very high. Some might call great, but right now they're in the midst of a time period when it's just close loss after close loss. They lost 3-2 in their first game back from the break to Calgary. Just crippling 2-1 loss to Winnipeg, in which they gave up a game tying goal with 26.3 seconds left on their second game on Monday night. And last night they lose 4-3 to Montreal. So while Sharks fans are trying to figure out how the team learns to win these close games, I'll ask you, someone who's been in these situations, is that a good question? Like, do you learn how to win those close games, or is it just a matter of the team being better and having more talent on the roster to where it's the outcome predicated upon having better and more experienced players?
Talent's a tough one because there's a ton of talent in San Jose. It's young talent, and but when you're not a completed product as a player or as a team, it's difficult. So I'll go back to the beginning, like losing close games, like winning and losing, both are habits, I think.
Mhm.
And when you win a lot, especially in different ways, I've been fortunate enough to be on good teams. Different guys contribute. There's a feeling or sort of a stubbornness that you're going to continue to play the way that is gives you the best chance for success on these good teams.
Mhm.
And eventually something's going to break in your favor, and it usually does, whether it's a big save and you go down and get a chance and score, or your special teams come through with a big kill or a big power play goal. These things are their habits because of the 50 or 55 minutes in the game time that you're playing is so disciplined, and you don't really veer off of the path that makes you great. I think that's as a team. So that's
Mhm.
when you see teardowns and rebuilds, I think that's the hardest part to learn, I guess, as a team. It's probably the hardest part to coach. It's to get through to guys because it's hard to quantify. It's hard to make it like a tangible thing. We need this. It's a bunch of little other things that make that product happen. And when you have a lot of talented players that have had success at every step of the way, but now are in a different league, you see the flashes of it. You see Max Celebrini, who I think is going to be a star in the league for a very long time. You see kind of where he's deficient, right? So taking on a rush in overtime, for example, last night, he's leaning too far forward and he takes the bait. Like these things, he's now going to learn that because it happened at the Bell Center in front of a lot of people. And it was, that's a great lesson for him because the Sharks aren't competing for the Stanley Cup this year. And he seems like the character in him seems like a guy that's going to learn from that and make it better so it doesn't happen again. Will Smith's another highly talented individual who left BC after only 1 year because, I mean, look what he did at BC, right? But watching him last year, I thought it was going to be difficult for him at the start because I know what the NHL is all about. It's just a
Mhm.
different animal. So, long-winded, you look at a team like Detroit, or you look at a team who actually I think has good leadership and then you look at a team like Buffalo. They moved on from some of the older guys. I think guys that have done it and would commit to a multi-year deal in places like that, they can really bring along the younger guys, not just in the room or out to dinner or how to be a pro, but like actually what they do every day, how consistent they are. That's what takes these teams up another level. It's so much harder when you have to start from scratch to build something than it is when you can retool a little bit.
I guess the other side of it is how hard is it to learn those habits when they've also traded away a Mikhail Granlund, who was arguably their best offensive player, even though
Mhm.
Macklin Celebrini's been coming on strong, and a Cody Ceci, and then previously their number one netminder in Mackenzie Blackwood. I mean, when the talent is going down overall, even though the young players are getting better, it makes the situation that much more difficult, right?
Yeah, and so I think if you're Mike Greer, you say, I hope we've learned these lessons because we can't really hold on to expiring deals, or we can't really hold on to guys that aren't going to come and stay here long term. And I don't know if there were any contract negotiations with the Mikhail Granlund. I think he would have been a great guy to have there for a number of years to teach these guys
Mm-hmm.
because of what he can do. He can play the wing, he can play center, he's good on faceoffs, he's a Finnish guy, so they always check. They play defensively, they're responsible players. I got to play with him in Nashville. He's a great teammate. I got to play with Mackenzie Blackwood in New Jersey. He's such a competitor. Like even in practice, those are, contagious habits that those guys have. But if Mike Greer's talking to their agent and there's really, they don't want to come back, then it's, they want to be a part of a winner. I can understand that too, as a competitor. It is difficult. The hope is, that the 55 games that they had with them, something, registered, some seeds were planted,
Mm-hmm.
and those guys can really understand that the guys that were traded away, like the Will Smiths and the Macklin Celebrini, can understand that the Mikhail Granlunds, the Cody Ceci's, like the guys that have been through stuff, what they told them is true. It matters. And you can't just stop doing it because now they're gone. And again, particularly with Ryan Warsofsky, he's a rookie coach too. So he's brilliant and he's on the fast track, and I'm rooting for that guy. He's from my neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not easy. It's probably easy for him to doubt whether that's the right thing or not. And he seems to stick to his guns pretty well.
Do you think that with a player like Tyler Toffoli going to San Jose as an established veteran, consistent performer, along with the young stars in a Macklin Celebrini and a Will Smith, and even Yaroslav Askarov, who looks like the goalie of the future for the franchise, do you think other free agents are going to be enticed by the idea of going to San Jose, knowing that they're what feels like a team that can rectify or change their overall direction very quickly? They have an enormous amount of cap space. And I know that Mike Greer is not trying to rush things, which I've interpreted to be is don't sign the big 8-year contract before you have to, or, just because you can. But they can bring in a lot of talent pretty quickly here. But I guess is the situation with San Jose to the point where guys feel like, yes, I can go there with other quality players and we can turn this into a contender sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think he probably looks at the contracts of Smith, Celebrini, these guys that are up in 2 years, right? They didn't burn anything off last year. Like Celebrini was just drafted. Like he can kind of keep them in lockstep. And so their extension's not for another 2 years. Then you can surround them. You're probably going to get another really good draft pick if you can get another draft pick from somewhere else, like they did with the trades they made. It's just they can build like that, or they can use some of that capital and get a younger player who's in the league right now who maybe isn't fitting somewhere else. There's a lot of really good players on expiring deals. This year is probably going to be a little trickier for Greer because the cap is going up. Other teams have more to offer now because they have more space than they thought they did.
Yeah.
So if a guy's hell bent on going to a contender, it's going to be tricky for Mike Greer, but he can offer maybe a little more term. I'm not saying overpay, but it's interesting because you can sell the fact that, like, we need you to help these two young studs, and they're going to talk about you for the rest of their career because of how much you helped them. There's a lot of really good players. Like there's a guy in Buffalo, Jason Zucker, he's a great pro. He goes to Buffalo. He's doing well. I mean, Buffalo's not doing well, but I know that guys in Buffalo love him. He's a great player that can really play at a high level still. Those are the types of guys that maybe not a big trade, maybe not, that's the guy that's going to get us over the top to win a Stanley Cup, like some of those teams are thinking, but he's a guy that's going to help an organization get better in terms of how they play on an 82 game schedule, because he knows what it takes to be a pro every single day.
When you look from the outside at the way that Mike Greer has gone about this rebuild, I know there's no quote unquote right answer of yes, he's rebuilding, the correct way, because if that were true, then everybody would do it one specific way to rebuild and you wouldn't have teams that were, in long-term playoff droughts. But just looking at how Mike Grier has done it with the draft capital that he's established, with the way that he has turned the farm system into now what arguably is the number one ranked in the NHL, although it's slow, and I'm sure, many fans in San Jose are patient. Do you like or appreciate the way he's gone about this rebuild?
Yeah, and I think if you look out east to like a team like Washington, Washington has John Carlson and Alex Ovechkin, right? And they lucked into, Dylan Strome, who wasn't qualified in Chicago. Like that's okay. And Tom Wilson, no one has a Tom Wilson. Um, they brought up their American League, or they signed Spencer Carberry, who's in the American League as a coach for a while, and they brought up guys through their Hershey program that was dominant in the AHL for a long time. You have McMichael, you got Protus now. There's a lot of homegrown talent there, I guess. And so they didn't have to bottom out quite as much.
Mm-hmm.
Last year they got into the playoffs. It was kind of a mirage, but they got in. And now look at them. Like that was a patient approach that Brian McClellan did in Washington with, he kept what he had that was a real big asset that was going to sell tickets, that was going to win him some games, and they grew the rest of it in the minors and they brought in some pieces here and there. Mike Grier's doing a similar thing. He doesn't have an Alex Ovechkin. He doesn't have a John Carlson or a Tom Wilson. So it's like, yeah, the bottom's a little bit lower for San Jose, but it's the same approach, right? And if your American League team's doing really big things, like that's pro hockey. It's not easy.
No.
And so now you have these young players that are, tasting success in pro hockey, learning how to play the right way because you can't win if you don't. And then you can bring them up and they're more cooked, they're more polished. They're ready to jump into a bigger and hotter fire, so to speak, that when it gets hard, they have a foundation they can look at and say, all right, this is my game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and simplify for a minute and then I'll expand from there. It's a really great approach because otherwise rookies get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know where they fit, where they stand. These guys are learning roles in that level, and then they're going to be brought up accordingly.
You bring up Tom Wilson, and I think about a guy like him or a Brady Tkachuk, and I think that's the type of guy that the Sharks would also love to be able to either have, which seems impossible knowing how much they're valued, or B, develop on their own, because you need that sandpaper, right? Like you have those guys in the league who, when opposing teams see him on the schedule, they're like, I don't want to play that guy tonight, which is a sign of respect. I think they love the competitive nature of it, but you're probably going to be a little bit more sore and a little bit more challenged throughout that game.
Well, think about how that would be in a playoff series. Right. So I remember Tom Wilson getting called up, I think from junior, his first go around, and he didn't play a whole lot, but he wasn't afraid of anybody. And then you watched him blossom into this like torpedo on ice. He can fly. He's got great hands. He'll fight anybody and he'll run through anybody. And that's the same thing with Brady Tkachuk, the same thing with Matthew Tkachuk. These guys, they have a great hockey IQ in the sense of what the game needs at the time. There's a understanding. They look around, they can take the temperature of their own team. That's another skill that no one really develops that much in terms of coaching when you're young, or understanding what's this game need right now. And those guys are far ahead, particularly the Tkachuk brothers, like taking the temperature of their own team, taking the temperature of the game itself. What's going on? What do we need? Maybe I'm quiet for this shift. I'll just try and go score a goal. I'll keep it quiet. Everything's going well. Or maybe it's not, and I'll throw a grenade in the pile and see what happens, because that sometimes is what you need. And those guys can do it. And, they can score a lot of goals. They can play. They're not just pugilists that are going out and yelling at you at the red line and then going back to the bench and they're play their 3 minutes. It's not like that anymore. These guys can play. So, the word unicorn is thrown around a lot with those guys. And for good reason. They're few and far between. They're hard to find.
With the emphasis of youth in the NHL these days, does that surprise you? Because it used to be, these guys needed development. You didn't want to rush them. You didn't want to fast track them unless it was a rare, exceptional habit or a talent, I should say. But now it just seems like, it's if a guy they think is ready, that's get him up, put him out there. And it's interesting to watch other sports do it. I think the NFL is the best comparison, because they used to be, have the quarterback sit on the bench, learn, watch, and now they're back to the mode of get them out there. And I'm sure it'll go back the other way where they want guys to learn and spend more time in the American League. But also, I look at the talent that these young guys have right now, and it is at such a high level. The skill that they possess at a young age. I mean, I'm 42 now. I've been watching hockey for a long time. I was 9 when the Sharks started, so I've been in since day one. These young players, though, I mean, they are just at such a high skill level. It's rather remarkable.
It is, and I coach squirt minors now, right? They're 9, some of them turn 10. They're doing the Michigan in practice, like in stride, and they're
Crazy.
doing things with their hands, and they're doing different things that are really, really impressive. Unfortunately, they don't understand sometimes. I'm not talking about the 9-year-olds now. Like they're 9, whatever. I'm not really judging them. We're trying to teach them the importance of the blue lines, how getting it out is important, getting it in is important. We're trying to teach them the neutral zone. If you can get through there the best and you can clog it up the best, you're going to win most games. We're teaching them D zone. We're teaching them different spacing things that every youth team, I think, probably teaches, but we have an emphasis on it. Straight line hockey, we call it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's going away a lot. And I watched the Bean Pot final. I've watched the last few cup finals very closely because I was working them. And I watched the Four Nations final, and those are just a few examples of straight line hockey winning every time. And when you get east-west and when you get the little bit too high skill, it against really good teams and good structure and defense, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good you are. And these are the best players in the world trying things that they couldn't figure out. And it's a breakdown. It's who's the most disciplined in their D zone. The goal that McDavid scored. McDavid played a game where he looked more human than I've ever seen him in the final, Canada-US. And he's the hero because he is that guy. He's the guy that's, if it's on his stick and he has a chance, he's going to score.
Yeah.
But there was a breakdown. And that's how long it took the Canadians to figure it out. There's a quick breakdown. There's my guy, bing, it's in the net, game over. So in hockey, or in the Bean Pot, BC's playing BU. BC's out shooting BU 15-2. They're having their way with them. They're going in straight lines, and then they start getting fancy with it. They want to make plays. They want to make it look pretty. There's a turnover because of it. It's 1-1. BU has the momentum. They're still just going in straight lines, and BU wins that game because of discipline. There's a shot discrepancy, but they win the game. They're the ones holding the jug at the end of the game. So same thing in the cup finals. Who can get to the middle of the ice? Who can keep you out of the middle of the ice? All that matters until there's a breakdown. And that's why the skill is important. I just think the emphasis on skill, which, you need to have, you need to be able to skate. You need to have some hands. But it's been impressive to watch. And the guys that can do it at the NHL level are incredibly impressive. I just wonder when the game switches and the ice shrinks, are they ready for it?
Right. No, I mean, that's the next stage of the development, is that all the skill in the world, like you said, when the game shrinks, that's, when they have to find out. Thankfully, these guys, usually if they're coming in at 18, they're not usually on the best teams in the world that are going to be challenged in the
I'll say this, though.
playoffs.
I'll say this about Macklin Celebrini. His 200-foot game at his age, at 18 years old, is so above what any other 18-year-olds I've seen.
Yeah.
It's incredible. His puck battle ones, like how he does things. He's not just a skilled guy. So like Sharks fans can get real excited about what they have with him because of he is so mature in that sense of the game too. It's incredible to watch.
The thing about him that I just blows me away, and it was a great quote I heard from somebody, because they're right, and I had noticed it, I just hadn't put it into words, but they said he's so heads up that he doesn't know what the puck looks like. I said, oh, I'm going to steal that. Yeah. But it's true. If you watch him, he's never head on a swivel 24/7. He's great with the puck on his stick, but he's just always heads up. He has such great vision. And yeah, I mean, it's both ways. The way he gets back centrally, the way he's immediately breaking back on D. He, like your point to that maturity, it is rare. It's just, for Sharks fans, they're caught in looking at the here and now, which is great because you see the potential, but the future, it's still a couple years away for the entirety of the team. And just as a last one for you here, I know that this is arguably the hardest part of the season. You're around the deadline, the break, you're getting into the final 25-ish games, or it's getting to just over 20 now for some teams. How hard is it at this point? How does your body feel? I know that it was a little bit of a longer break this year with Four Nations, but I have to imagine that you're tired. I mean, this is why they say October and November hockey is not the same as January, February, and March.
Yeah, you are. It is difficult. So far, I was lucky enough the last 11 years I played, we were in a playoff team. So it was more, I would take the break and lift a lot of weight and try and build the engine back up and do what I could to be ready. I'd do more bike rides on off days because you're really trying to peak at the start of the playoffs if you can. And that's not to say you don't grind and play through things all year long, because you do. You just get there's just another, it's like a supplement that you take that you're like excited. You have more energy because the playoffs are coming. For a team that's not going to make the playoffs, usually it's younger. That was me when I was younger, playing in LA or whatever. And it was like, here's your chance to audition. Like, camps next year, but it's not last year, because now we're going to have new guys too. We're going to try to improve this team. So you have to go earn your spot again next year. Here's your audition. You get a head start on whoever we don't have, because I'm watching you right now. So you better get excited. So you better have a little jump in your step and get, regardless if you're tired or you're banged up, because they all are, maybe a little less than, 15 years ago. It's a little bit of a different game, but it is a faster game. So you could have some soft tissue stuff you're dealing with. There's a lot that goes into it, but that again is another lesson that these young players can learn. Like, every game in this league is a privilege, no matter where you are, no matter what your contract says, it could be your last. So you better get excited for the end of the year. And then when it ends, you have a long summer to train and get ready for next year. And we're not going to accept the same result as last year. If I'm a San Jose Shark, I'm not going to accept the same result as last year. So let's start building towards next year right now.
Brian, man, I appreciate your time. This has been absolutely phenomenal, and I hope I can bug you again soon. All right, man?
Right on, Ted. Thanks, bud.
And remember, you can watch NHL Network analyst Brian Boyle on NHL Now and NHL Tonight throughout the second half of the season.